Hello and welcome to the latest installment of PSG Talking. I'm your host Ed, and on today's episode, we're talking all about PSG vanquishing Villa, Premier League snobbery, and everyone's favorite topic, Real Madrid imploding. But before we get there, let me thank all of you out there who have subscribed to PSG Talk Extra Time on Substack. We really appreciate your support. I hope you enjoy the content we've been putting out. If you haven't subscribed, I hope you consider doing that. It's only $5 a month, $50 for the whole year. You get bonus podcast episodes, and you get some columns as well. All right, joining me today, a tradition unlike any other, is longtime PSG Talk contributor Marc Damon. Marc, before we get to PSG and all the football going on, are you happy? Rory McIlroy won the Masters. Good by you?
I am incredibly happy about that. Long time. I love watching the Masters. It's one of my favorite sporting events of the entire calendar year. And to see a guy who never won it, who needed to win it, to cement his legacy, to finally get the thing he'd always wanted, that was really cool. That was a really, special sports moment. And the whole final round was just insane from beginning to end. You just had so many twists and turns. It was never easy. You have to go to a playoff at the end. Just amazing shot making. It was just some of the best golf you'll ever see. Really good day. Really, really good Master Sunday. It puts me in a good mood to talk about PSG going into the Aston Villa match in the middle of the week.
Maybe, perhaps, a good omen. Rory, he needed to win that. It was the one thing that he didn't have. He's been considered one of the best. There's a lot of crossover there with PSG. They've been at this for a little while. It's the one trophy they haven't won. So maybe 2025 is the year of kind of just finally winning that big trophy in multiple sports for different teams. So hopefully we can keep that going. All right, let's leave the golf to the side because we need to get into some football. We're a little bit late to recap that 3-1 win over Villa. Forgive me, I was doing some traveling. Every now and then you got to recharge the batteries. But anyway, we're back. I've got Marc here. We're going to recap that match. Let's do that. And then we'll also look at the return leg at Villa Park this Tuesday. So, Marc, let's just get right to it. What were some of your main takeaways from that first match at the Parc des Princes?
Yeah, so before that match, I put out on Twitter that I felt like PSG needed to make a statement at home. And in the knockout rounds, they really haven't in a while. Like the last time they had won a convincing sort of knockout stage game at home was that 2020 match against Borussia Dortmund, the day before the world stopped and there were no fans. And that before even that, the last time they'd really had a statement win at the Parc in a Champions League knockout round with fans in attendance was 2017 when they beat Barcelona 4-0, and then we all know how that turned out. So it's been a while, right? Like you think of the Parc des Princes as this sort of big fortress that PSG always defend and always have big wins at. And in reality, a lot of the big PSG Champions League wins over the last 5-6 years or so have been on the road. And I felt like against a Villa team that on paper they were far better than, they needed to come out and they needed to put together a 90-minute performance where they could, prove that indeed they were the better team and that they could go out and reach expectations and win a game like that as the favorite. And we'll get into the details of it, but I would say mission accomplished for leg one.
Absolutely. And that late goal by Nuno Mendes certainly will go a long way. I think if they go on to advance, certainly you can look at that goal as maybe perhaps the reason why. Because I think Villa will definitely come out fighting. And I think maybe score another goal and make this a little bit tighter than maybe PSG wants. But I think that goal is going to be crucial. I think what stood out to me is just the absolute bangers that PSG scored in this game. I mean, Désiré Doué, unbelievable. Kvaratskhelia, unbelievable goal. These guys just roofed it. I think both of those goals actually went off the crossbar, and then the other one, another, I think maybe off the post and then in for Kvara. And I think what stood out to me was after these goals, you looked at the faces of the Villa players, and they had a look that I'm not sure that I've seen on that many opponents that PSG have played, especially in the Champions League, which was, we can't play with these guys. We are overwhelmed. To your point, when we did the preview podcast, you were like, there's no one on this Villa team that would get into our team. And I'm still have like the battered PSG fan syndrome, where I think the worst and everything bad's going to happen. But you called it. PSG outmanned them. They had better talent. They dominated every statistical category. And I think after those two goals went in, you look at, Rashford and Rodgers and Kamara and some of the other guys, and they were just kind of like, wow, we got nothing. We got nothing for these guys. And it was a look that I hadn't seen before. And I think it kind of speaks to how special this team is and how talented they are, that it doesn't matter if it's a La Liga team or a Premier League team. This PSG team is legit.
They are legitimately one of the best 3 to 4 teams in Europe. I think we can.
They're frightening. Frightening is a good word. I mean, for opponents, they are frightening.
I think we can safely say that at this point. What really stood out to me again is that we've seen a lot over the years where a PSG team had the ball or had possession and were able to sort of dictate, but we're never really able to have those sorts of fantastic finishes against low blocks, right? Because the Aston Villa team very much decided that they were going to try to either get out of here with a draw or a 1-0 win or a 1-0 loss. They wanted to keep it in that range. There was no thought of playing with PSG at the Parc des Princes. They didn't want to possess the ball. They didn't want to try to make, they were barely able to make 5 passes in a row most of the game. The idea was not to try to go toe for toe with this PSG roster, because I think the Villa team very much knew that they couldn't. So you had a very typical Unai Emery, game plan. And for, I'd say, the first 35 minutes of the game, I think Unai Emery's team played about did what they needed to do. I'm not going to say they played well, but they did what they needed to do. They played solid defense in the back. They weren't giving PSG a lot of grade A opportunities. You had that Dembele chance, I think, in the first 5 minutes that Emi Martinez saved. I think besides that, I didn't really see a whole lot of grade A's early on. And
I think Vitinha had a shot from distance that was just over the crossbar.
Yeah, and you saw that PSG really at times, I think in that first half, had like 80% of the possession. And all it took was one Villa counter, right? Nuno Mendes gets a little cute on the ball in midfield. He loses it to Jean McGinn, and McGinn, a couple passes here and there, and I think it's Morgan Rogers who finished it on the counter, and that is a classic Unai Emery counter. And at that point, I'm like, okay, I'm a little worried right now, because it seems like PSG are going to struggle to score, and this Aston Villa counter is no joke. Like, they can legitimately bite you, and it was like 3 or 4 passes. PSG couldn't get back defensively. Mendes was not where he should have been because he was the guy that lost the ball. And they end up with a tap-in. And you look at that and you go, all right, this might be a little bit of an issue. But then you get the quality. The quality comes to the fore. And you see Désiré Doué, PSG gets some pressure. Ball gets swung over to Doué on the left. Couple little dribbles, gets by his defender, and just an absolute rocket curler of a shot. Like he gets so much backbend on this thing, and he falls down shooting it because he has so much whip and power on it. And that allows that ball, when it hits the post, to just spin in. And you get that just brilliant goal. And then you're back to 1-1. Again, if you told Aston Villa at the end of the first half of this game they would be tied at 1, they would take it. I think 100 times out of 100 they would take that. But you then get a nice passage of play. PSG work the ball from right to left, get it to Kvara, and Kvara basically takes it himself. just at the outside of the box, he does this roll. He does this roll with his right foot, where he basically puts
Mhm.
Axel Disasi in a blender. Like they literally, they had Matty Cash playing on that left side at right back, I believe. I think it was Matty Cash who was playing right back, and he was just getting dominated the whole first half. Picks up a yellow early on,
Yeah.
just can't keep up with Kvara, can't keep up with Doué. It's just a slaughter. They bring
Matty Cash sounds like a World Series of poker,
well,
like
no, it
elite
sounds like a
player.
British second division player is what it sounds like. And then you bring in Axel Disasi, and Kvara puts him, literally induces a seizure on the field, the way he sort of, flops around, gets the ball on his left foot, and then just rockets one by Martinez, hits the inside of the left post and into the
Yeah.
top of the net. Just insane levels of skill. And this is, again, how many times did you see, PSG reliant on the skills of Neymar and Mbappe and Messi and Cavani and Demi Maria? And how many times did those guys just not even come close to making shots like that in a Champions League knockout round match? And now you got these
Yeah,
you got these
100%.
20-year-old. You got this guy, one guy who's 23 and the other guy who's 19, who are making these just big time goals out of nothing, really. They're not walking the ball in the net. These are high degree of difficulty goals. And you get it to 2-1, and now PSG really dominated from that point.
Yeah. Once that goal went in, absolutely, Aston Villa was like, okay, let's try to sit back as much as we can and try to keep this at least at 2-1. And you get it back at our place, we could make up a goal. That's probably what the mindset was, and that's why I said earlier that Nuno Mendes goal late was so vital. Just sits Martinez on his rear end and then scores just a really good goal. Not too many left backs are going to be scoring a goal like that with that kind of control and placement and pace on the ball.
Yeah.
So Nuno Mendes, he gave up a goal, but he
And,
made up
and
for it,
yeah,
more than made
and
up
I'll
for
say
it
two
there.
things about that goal. First off, I think Aston Villa came out a little bit in the 85th minute, and you started to see them trying to get a goal back. And I actually think that was kind of a mistake, because it sort of left them open for what PSG were able to do. And if I were Aston Villa, I would have been happy down 2-1. I would have been absolutely happy with that line.
Oh yeah,
And
absolutely.
to let and credit to Ousmane Dembele for that pass, because you're in the 92nd minute of the game, and you sort of have the wherewithal to make a pass like that, break through the line. Nuno Mendes, we talk about this a lot. We talk about PSG all the time, but I don't necessarily think we always mention enough how dynamic PSG's fullback play is. Right? Like, these are Hakimi and Nuno Mendes are basically center forward quality finishers playing
I mean,
fullback.
Hakimi scored. He was only maybe half a foot offside. I mean, he did score a goal, and he was
But
dangerous all
how
night.
many teams in world football have fullbacks that can do what Nuno Mendes did in that game? Very few. Like, that
Very
is a
few.
striker's goal. That's like something you would see from a top level, like Mohamed Salah, level player, right? That's not something you'd see from your typical left back. And
Yeah, I mean, not too many left backs are putting a goalkeeper of the quality of Martinez on his butt, and then scoring that kind of goal. Not too many are doing
it
that.
just it gives PSG a whole dynamic that I just don't think other teams in Europe have. I don't see other teams in Europe having that kind of skill at such a critical position. And yeah, it does sometimes leave them a little vulnerable in the back. But if your fullbacks are able to do that, I can't fault them. Like, that's just brilliance. Like, and to get that goal really puts PSG in a good position. And up 2-1, I would have still liked their chances, but I think it would have been a more complicated kind of tie for them. Now you give yourself a little bit of breathing room, and it's going to be an interesting test, and we'll talk about the return leg. But this sort of put PSG at least in a more comfortable position going into it.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And just looking at some of the stats, I mean, PSG 29 total shots to Villa's 7, 10 on target to Villa's only 2, XG of 1.95 for PSG, so outperformed their XG, Villa 0.74. So again, just dominated. PSG 795 accurate passes to Villa's 205. You called it. This was absolutely domination.
Yeah.
There was one clearly better team in this one.
Yeah, and you just look at the midfield play and just how much of an advantage having a Vitinha has in a like they just don't have anyone in the stratosphere of a Vitinha. Like they don't even have we're talking about like they don't even have anyone in the same area code. Like they're living in a whole different, the types of players that Villa has versus the types of players that PSG have. And I think Vitinha had something like a 97% pass accuracy. Like when you're able to just pass with impunity and have no resistance like that, it just makes everyone's lives easier, right? Like,
yeah, I'm looking at the stats. It says here in the match, Vitinha completed 148 passes, which was significantly more than any other player. He only misplaced 4 passes all night, giving him a 97.4 pass success rate. That's from BBC Sports. So 148 passes, only 4 went astray, if you will.
Yeah, like that's I don't know what Verratti's stats in that in that kind of category were in his prime, but probably around that, if not better. Like, you just like it really is just a embarrassment of talent that PSG have. It really is. It's hard to. We've had teams with a lot of upfront talent and a lot of names, but I'm not sure there's ever been a team that just has up and down the roster this level of talent. Like there's always.
I mean, if you look, how many players would you say in that starting lineup against Villa would you say are in the top 10 in their position? Donnarumma, is he a top 10 goalkeeper?
Some would argue.
I think so.
I'd say some
10.
would argue. So let's go through it. Some would argue.
Yeah.
Some would argue that one. I would say yes. I think top 10's easily top 10. Probably not top 5, but he's probably top 10.
No, easily, yeah. Okay, go to Nuno Mendes next. I think, yeah.
William Pacho, not yet, but will be. Not yet, but will be. I wouldn't put him as a top 10 center back in the world yet, but he's been really good.
Beraldo, no, and Marquinhos, no.
Hakimi, yes.
Hakimi, yes.
So what are we up to now? We're up to 3 out of the 5.
We got 3.
Vitinha, yes.
Yes.
Fabian and João Neves. João Neves will be. Fabian's probably top 25.
That's fair. Yeah, I think João Neves is probably top 15, 20, but he'll get top 10, but he's not quite there yet.
And then Dembele, yes. Kvara, yes. I think he's the top 10 winger in the world.
I think so. Doué's the most interesting one because I'm curious to hear what you say. Is he a top 10 player?
No, but I think he's like going again. We look at this. They either have either all of these guys are top 10 or they're going to be top 10, right? Like Doué, unless something really tragic happens to his career, Désiré Doué is going to be one of the 10 best attacking players in the world. Like this is not up for debate. Ousmane Dembele is having a Ballon d'Or level season. Kvara is probably the best sort of full field winger in the world, or one of them. You're forgetting Kvara also plays an incredibly high level of defense for somebody who plays wing.
It's like they got the complete opposite of Mbappé. It's like we want someone who plays both ends pretty much, and they found the perfect. You couldn't have built a better player that Luis Enrique would want in a laboratory somewhere. I mean, Kvara is
like
perfect.
He would have fit in like any era of PSG. Like he would have fit in the 90s. He would have fit in the 80s. So just the mentality that he has, the fight that he has. Just he would have.
He kind of is old school with the beard. It looks like he could be like from
Yeah,
the
he's like an
70s.
old school Italian. Even though he's not Italian, he's like an old school like Italian. He's got the
Yeah.
mentality right. He's not a. He just has that toughness to him. Like
Yeah.
I think there. I think it was in the Villa game. I'm pretty sure he
Mhm.
was cutting in. He was in the box. He was trying to cut back towards the top side, and he gets almost tripped. Like somebody
Mhm.
gets his legs,
Yeah.
and
He
he
stays
stays
up.
up. How many guys in that situation go down and try to draw the penalty? He gets up and he gets a shot out of it. I think the shot goes wide, but
Yeah.
that's the mentality he has. That's a real, that's a really strong mentality, in that point in the game to not just
Mhm.
try to fall and try to draw penalties in that spot. Just
So
guys
I
wired
totally
differently, and
agree.
I like those kind of guys.
I love it. So we've got 6 players that we think are in the top 10 for their position, and 3 of the ones who aren't in there we think are probably going to be there as early as next season or the next 2 to 3 seasons. So I mean, the squad is unbelievable. And then, we're not even talking about Warren Zaire-Emery and Bradley Barcola, who are, came in off the bench, or Gonzalo
Yeah.
Ramos. And Lucas Hernandez, who's coming back from the injury, but still a very high level player. Kang-In Lee, who I think could do something special. This squad is so damn good. So good. Let's keep it moving, Mark, because I want to get into. We talked about PSG dominating this game. They dominated every statistical category that mattered. Do you expect that same performance on the road at Villa Park? So answer that first part, and then in your answer, would you make any changes to the starting 11? I assume you'd put Marquinhos in there, but would you do anything else? Would you bring Barkla in?
I think this is an interesting one because if we're just talking about the lineup, I think Désiré Doué has such momentum right now, and he's been so good that it's really hard to take him out. Like it is very hard to take him out because he's just been so good the last month. How do you justify it? But I also think if the game goes the way I think that it could, with Villa having to come out and having to try to play with the ball, having our best sort of counter guy in Barcola on the field does make some sense. It does make sense to
Agreed.
have him out there because, we saw how dangerous he was in the game against Manchester City when City came out and played that high line and Barcola just torched it. You saw how effective he was against Stuttgart when Stuttgart were trying to chase the game. They came out and attacked, and Bradley Barcola just got behind them multiple times. So it's
And he's going to be well rested. He didn't come in until what, the 72nd minute, and there was no game this weekend, so he's going to be rested. He'll be
I think
ready to
it's a
go.
real. I think it's just really depends on, do you think that Aston Villa are going to be aggressive early in the game, or do you think that Aston Villa will try to just play to their strength and not come out and, hope that they could hit PSG on a couple of counters and get back in the game that way? Or again, did they go and try to be aggressive?
No, they got to come out. PSG can play possession based all day. I mean, they've
But
got Neves and Vitinha. They'll pass it around the
do
park.
you see like Villa being able to carve PSG apart 3 times in a game?
No, but they're gonna have to. They have to try. Otherwise, they'll just lose
But do
possession.
you
And
think
and
but
well,
my point
the
being, do you think it's easier for them to score 2 counter goals or 3 goals in possession where they're dictating the play of the game?
oh, it'll be easier to score the counter goals, but PSG won't give them the opportunity. They'll just sit back and pass it
Well,
around.
good point, but I do think that we saw that was a vulnerability in the first leg. And
Yeah, I mean, Nuno lost the ball, but they would prefer to hit on the counter. But Luis Enrique is going to say, "Don't get stretched, fullback, stay back. I know it's tempting, but stay back and just play sound, fundamental soccer football, and just stay back. Don't
yeah.
get stretched." And Villa won't be able to
And this is
counter.
a test for PSG because all of these games are really tests because PSG haven't really been in this position before where they're nursing a lead in the second leg with this group, right? Like Go back to last year. They
Yeah.
kind of were in the spot against Real Sociedad, but I didn't think that Real Sociedad team was any good, honestly. The Barcelona, they were down in going to the second leg. Dortmund, they were down going to the second leg. Liverpool, they were down going into the second leg. Now you're up 2 goals. Really, all PSG have to do is score one. I think does it, honestly. Like, I don't see Aston Villa
Yeah.
scoring
Yeah.
3 goals. It's possible. It's football. Anything's possible, but
Yeah.
it's not probable.
It,
And
it'd be nice to get that goal early, and then you really put a sense of panic in the Villa.
yeah, and the question really becomes: does Villa, if PSG can jump on them early and dominate, does Villa sort of, do they sort of not give up, but do you start to see the heads sagging a little bit, and you start to see maybe they just don't have the ability to really make the
Yeah.
push. They're going to need consistent pressure over a long stretch of time. And that's a tough thing for a team like that to do when, again, you don't have the better players. And I'm thinking this is going to be tricky, at least in the first half. I think Villa are going to come out hot. I think it's just natural for a team that's up 2 goals in a tie to not be super aggressive. Even though you hear Luis Enrique going, all right, we're going to be aggressive. We're going to play the way we always play. We're going to attack. We're not going to sit back. I think that's really like coach speak, to be honest. I think just the natural flow of things and the natural way that the team will react, I think you'll see Villa get their chances early. And the question then becomes, does PSG repel that? And can they sort of, take advantage, score the 4th goal of the tie, and sort of like put this thing to bed early? I'd like them to put it to bed early. I don't want to have stress on a Tuesday afternoon. I'd like
No, who wants stress on a Tuesday?
yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't want to stress. The Champions League is always stressful. I always kind of feel sick when these things kick off, but this should be, let's coast to a nice professional victory. I asked you about some changes. I think I agree with you. Let's give Barcola a chance. I think you're right. I think he's great at countering if that's the way Villa wants to play it.
Yeah, and the
And then
thing
you've
with
got Doué
and
on
the
the
thing with
bench.
Barcola is he's not like a slouch defensively. Like
No, 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 no.
he's not going to just not track back and stuff. Like he's more than capable of doing that. So it just depends on what you think is needed in that game. I think they'll just stay with the 11 that they had, to be honest. I don't think they're going to try
Probably.
to
Yeah.
change anything. I mean, obviously Marquinhos for Beraldo, but like I don't see them really changing anything. The only other thing I would maybe think about is with Fabian on the yellow, do you play Warren Zaire-Emery to try to avoid losing Fabian for the first leg against Arsenal or Real Madrid?
Hmm.
Do you take that?
He's a little out of form, but I do like his physicality, and I like that he can, if PSG are being overwhelmed by Villa at any point, that he can kind of step in. He is more defensive minded, I think. I wouldn't mind that. I don't think it'll happen, but I wouldn't mind
I
it.
just don't want to lose Fabian on something stupid and then not have him in. I think he's more important to this team than most realize, and I wouldn't want him out of the lineup again in that first leg of the
Yeah.
semifinal. I'd really rather have him. So it's just another thing to keep in mind. It's to see if the manager maybe wants to be if they think they can get away with it.
I don't have any. There's nothing been said by Unai Emery or any Villa fans, but I'm looking at the Premier League table, and just when I saw those goals go in and I saw the look on the players' faces, I wonder if Villa's going to think, "Look, let's go out there, let's see what we can do." But really, their concentration is going to be getting into the Champions League next season. So currently, they're in 7th
You
place
see,
in
I
the
don't
Premier League
I don't
table.
necessarily see it that way because if
No.
they pull this off, they're in the semifinal, probably against Arsenal, a team that they know very well. That's a
Mm-hmm.
golden opportunity for them to be in a Champions League final. that's the best chance they're probably ever going to have of making it.
It's a business. It's all about the money. It's nice to win, but they know they're not going to beat any of the
But they
top
might. But
teams.
they have a better chance of beating Arsenal as a team that they've seen twice already in the regular season.
Say Arsenal just beat Real Madrid 3-0? I don't know.
I don't know, but you know what I'm saying?
I don't know. I think,
it's
yeah,
like,
I
it's
hear
like a
you.
division rival in football, in the NFL. Like, just because they can keep it close, they know how to play them. Emery knows how to play against Arteta. I'm just saying, I think that Villa at home with a fan base that's going to be, if we get into one of those sort of, is this a Newcastle situation where the crowd is just so ravenous that the young PSG team gets rattled if a goal goes in early. I'm just saying, one goal completely flips this on its ear. And if you get that crowd behind you, it could be a problem, which is why I think, obviously, the most important part of this game is going to be the first 20 to 25 minutes of it.
You get Prince William behind you, anything's possible.
Not even as a joke. These things can turn. It's the Champions League. Weird things happen. It's why it's the toughest competition to win. Like it's because just anything can happen, and the ties just turn on a dime. And it's like, for a young team that hasn't been there before, in this situation, they've passed every test so far, really. And I'm not saying that they're in trouble. I'm just saying that there is a universe where this becomes tricky. And I think PSG just have to be prepared for it. And I don't want them to have the hubris of saying, oh, we're just going to do what we always do, and we're just going to dominate, and, we're going to possess them to death. Yeah, you could get to that point after a while, but you're going to have to suffer for a good 20, 25 minutes of this game at the beginning of it. Like, there's going to be suffering in this one. How much suffering, I don't know. But there's definitely going to be some suffering, and they definitely have to be ready for it and mentally capable of handling it.
There will be blood. What happened to the positive, Marc Damon? We kind of flipped.
I think that from a positive perspective, I think they're going to win. I think they're probably going to win this game 2-1 or something like that. But it's not. The Champions League is weird. It's a weird competition where it's like one little thing that happens could change it. So you have to always be focused. It's the ultimate test of a team's mental focus, right? Like it's
True.
we in America, when we were all kids, we took something called the SATs. And the SAT is like a 5-hour, 6-hour test. And it's not really an intelligence test as much as it is an endurance test. And it's the endurance of keeping your mind focused for that long to answer that many questions is a real task. And it's a real strain on you physically and mentally to do that. So I look at the Champions League in a similar way. It's an endurance test. It's, can you stay focused for long enough, and can you not make stupid mistakes when it matters? Can you be locked in for a really long stretch of time? And I think PSG have done really well so far in doing that. They did it against Liverpool. They did it in that first leg against Aston Villa. They didn't crack when they got countered that one time. I think they're going to rise to the occasion again. I'm just saying, weird things happen. That's all I'm saying.
So you gave me your prediction. Are you going to stick with 2-1 to PSG and they advance?
Yeah, I think it's 2-1. I think Villa are going to get I think PSG score the first goal. I think Villa get one back, and then I think PSG finish it off when Villa are trying to, get themselves back in the game. So that ends up being 5-2 on aggregate, something like that. That sounds about right.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna go 1-1. I think this one PSG are gonna get their goal and Villa's gonna keep trying, and I think they'll just sit back and keep possession. So I like 1-1, which would put it at 4-2 PSG advancing on aggregate. I'll take it. Let's change the topic here now that we got our predictions out of the way. This is something that you sent me, Mark, and it brought it to my attention. There is a channel on YouTube. They might be other places, just where I found. I know they have an X account, but it's called That's Football with Mark Goldbridge. You may know him. He's Manchester United fan. They had a video they were talking about where PSG and some other top clubs like Real Madrid and Barcelona, where would they finish if they had to play in the vaunted Premier League? And they both said that they didn't believe that PSG would finish top of the league or anywhere near, maybe even in the top four. And the reason for that was because just, little old PSG, they're just not used to the intensity of the matches in the Premier League every week. I think it was Goldbridge who mentioned, Fulham away and as an example of that intensity. Yeah, yeah. So do you think they have a point, or is this Premier League snobbery?
No, I just find it funny that we talk about, for years the whole thing was, the whole thing was PSG play in a soft league with no talent, and because of that they're always ill prepared for the intensity of the Champions League, right? That's the whole thing. Like, they play in a farmers league and they never play any intense tough games, so that when they finally go and play a team in an actual competition, they're not up to the task. That's what we've been saying for years. Now it's Liverpool couldn't beat PSG because Liverpool had to run through the mighty gauntlet of the Champions League. And they're worn out from all those big major Champions League matches against Southampton and Fulham and Wolverhampton Wanderers. And because of all those tough games they had to play against those vaunted teams, they weren't able to rise to the occasion against a PSG team that plays in a soft league, so they're well rested, right? Now they're well rested. They don't have to play all these tough games, so it makes them it makes them prepare more easily for Champions League matches. Notice how that logic sort of is able to flip on its ear after all these years, right? Like, now it's the league is easy, and that's an advantage, as opposed to it formerly being a disadvantage. But I think that just the dumb there's a fallacy in the thinking, right? Like, it's not about the quality of the league. It's never been about the quality of the league. It's never been about whether PSG play in the Premier League or Liga or La Liga. Are they playing Getafe, or who's better, Lyon or Getafe? Right? That none of that really matters, and I think it's, even for PSG fans, it's been this sort of thing we've had to try to defend against over the years.
Yeah, it's not apples to apples. It's very hard to compare across
But
the
I
leagues.
think after all these years, I've sort of figured that it doesn't even really matter, to be honest, what league you play in. Like, what really matters is the talent you have on the field, right? That's what matters. So if your team is talented and it has, 8 to 10 high quality starters in the team, it doesn't really matter what league you play in. You could play in England, you can play in Germany, you could play in Spain, you can play in France. It doesn't matter. The game that you play, if you have great players, will translate to whatever game you're playing in whatever competition you're playing in. And that, I think, is what what people don't understand, which is it doesn't matter. Like, would PSG win the Premier League by 20 points? Probably not. But they would consistently finish in the top four. I'm pretty sure with the talent they have, they could beat Nottingham Forest and Chelsea and Manchester City and all those teams. I'm pretty sure they could beat up on some of those. I'm pretty sure they could beat Fulham, and I'm pretty sure they could beat Wolves. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like the talent PSG has is way better. And we're talking about this, like, Aston Villa this year are what, the seventh best team in the Premier League? And PSG's
right now.
entire roster is better than Aston Villa's entire roster.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, how many of the Premier League teams can say 6 of their starting 11 are in the top 10 of their
Yeah.
position with 3
No,
additional players
it's
well on their way? Not that
it
many.
doesn't like it doesn't matter. And the idea that Liverpool couldn't beat PSG because they had to go through the crucible of the Premier League doesn't make sense when in reality, if you did a Liverpool PSG starting 11, PSG probably get 8 of the 11.
I think
They
you're
get
right.
8 of the
I do
11.
also wonder,
Probably.
yeah, you got Mo Salah and Van Dijk and Konate. I think I would take those guys, but I think with the Premier League, there's so much money in there, and I wonder. I said when we matched up against Liverpool that this is sort of a down year for the Premier League, and I wonder with all of that money, are they sort of falling into the trap that PSG did in the past, where they're just trying to buy their way to titles and that, and has the development and has the scouting gotten away from Premier League teams? You look at Tottenham down in 15th and Man U
Yeah.
14th. Not that long ago, Everton always played good football. They were up there, but now they're at the bottom of the league. So Southampton, I think, was a team that could develop players, and they're going to be relegated. So I wonder if just the scouting and development in
Well,
the league as a whole, is
well,
it not what it
no.
used to
Well,
be?
what happens is you sort of talent tends to funnel to the top, right? The real talent is in the sort of top 2 to 3 teams in any league, right? No matter what league you're talking about, all the best talent sort of
Yeah.
funnels
Yep.
up to that level. To like, there's 10 teams in Europe that are I would consider elite, and all of the talent really goes to those teams: Real Madrid, Barcelona, Atletico, PSG, Bayern Munich, Liverpool, Manchester City, um,
Milan
the
clubs,
Milans, and but not
Juventus.
anymore, but you get the point. Yeah. So really the elite
Yeah,
10 to
yeah, yeah.
12 clubs, all the real talent gets funneled to that, and then everyone else sort of picks up what's left. And the reason the Premier League can boast, being a strong league, all that money allows the mid-table teams to retain quality players, not world-class players, but quality players, right? Like Lyon can't retain their quality players. Marseille can't really retain their quality players. If they're any good, they're going to get funneled up into the top 10 or 12. And you look at around right now, and I think that's what you see. And I think with Liverpool and with what's happened in the Premier League this year is, Liverpool sort of have a team at the end of a cycle, but they have just enough guys playing at a high level to get away with it. Manchester City at the end of a cycle, but they don't have, they didn't have the sort of guys playing at the high enough level to get away with it this year. They didn't have Kevin De Bruyne playing at a high level, or, they didn't have a Bernardo Silva playing at a high level. And a lot of those teams are down. And a team like Chelsea has a lot of decent young talent, but they're not close. Like you look at the Chelsea to PSG comparison, and how PSG I think took a similar tactic to what Chelsea did in attracting the young players, but PSG got the right young players, and Chelsea didn't get the right young players. And Arsenal, I think, are probably I even though Liverpool have won the Premier League, basically, I think Arsenal as a team, I think are a stronger team. Like they're in terms of being able to sort of win in Europe and go toe to toe with top clubs. I think Arsenal are a little bit better in that regard, but even they're like not great. So it's gonna take one of those teams hitting on a nice golden generation of players to really go back up. I think into the top ranks of European football right now.
It's a great point about the cycles. I think you're right. PSG are just right on that ascension. They've got a good mix. Dembele, I would say, is more of a veteran player, but you got young players, Zaire-Emery and
Yeah.
Barclay and Doué. You got a really good mix. PSG is definitely on the ascent, and maybe that's what it is. The Premier League, a lot of their upper echelon teams are at the end of a cycle. Let's also not forget there's a lot of these Premier League teams owned by American owners. Is that having an impact? Do they not have the right people in place to identify the talent? There's a lot of money, but as we know as PSG fans, you can spend money really poorly and assemble a lopsided team.
And also let's make
Yeah.
the point of I'll make 2 points just to go back to the initial point that I made. Those PSG teams, even though they were dominating in France, were not, amazing, amazing teams. Let's be honest. Like PSG were putting guys like Levin Kurzawa and Gregory Vanderveel and, just not world-class players in these sides for years. And Krakowiak, but even just like the teams that were, in the Neymar Mbappe era, you got guys like Ander Herrera, who's was not a world class player at the time. Idrissa Gueye, who was, had his moments but wasn't a world class player. Thomas Meunier and Mitchell Bakker, and because PSG had so much money invested in their front three, a lot of the sort of depth of their team suffered. And honestly, there were times where besides the front three, the actual spine of the team besides Verratti wasn't any good.
The more just reading off the names, it's like, what in the world were we watching back then?
But that's my point.
Sounds terrible.
They weren't losing Champions League games because the league. They weren't losing because the Ligue 1 wasn't good. They were losing because the team wasn't that good. In hindsight, I think a little more than anything else, but the team wasn't very good. Besides
that team wouldn't fare well in the Premier League.
Those teams, those like 17, 8, those teams would have struggled in the Premier League. Absolutely. Definitely. I wouldn't even argue that.
Pull them away would have been a problem for them.
It was a problem in Ligue 1 when they went away half the time.
Yeah. No, it's a fair point. So I think we've covered that one. Let's get to the last topic, which is Real Madrid imploding. You could pick up on any of these topics. We'll talk about all of them, but take the first one that is most meaningful to your heart. And we've got, Arsenal beating just 3-0 at the Emirates, just running them out the building. Arsenal up 3-0 after the first leg in that tie. We all expected a reunion with Mbappe. That's looking like that's on life support. And then you've got Real Madrid. They're 4 points behind Barcelona in La Liga in second place. You've got the most recent match against Alaves. Kylian Mbappe just went crazy, just went berserk and tried to break a guy's leg. He's going to miss between 1 to 3 matches, which I think is kind of a joke based on what he did. And after that, our old friend Craig Burley on ESPN FC, he said of Mbappe, quote, "That is an egotistical big head who thinks he can do whatever he wants," end quote. Man, that is some fire from Mr. Burley. So take all of that. What do you want to take on first? Real Madrid, they've got problems.
Well, yeah, and there's actually a few angles you can take with this one, honestly. The first one I will say is that I think Real Madrid are still sort of, and it's worked. And let's be honest, there's no team in European football that has done Galacticos better than Real Madrid. There's no better example of bringing in top guys and making it work better than Real Madrid. No team has ever come close to how well they've done this. There's a real sort of, the idea is basically that we can bring in all of this world-class talent, and at the end of the day, all of that world-class talent is still not as important as the badge, right? That's the whole trick. That's the whole scheme. That's the whole con, right? That even no matter who we bring in, they are less important than the Real Madrid badge. And that will keep them in line. And that will keep them on the straight and narrow. And that will bring everyone together under that badge to sort of create these super teams that in theory shouldn't really work if you actually put them on paper or in actual practice. But they work because, again, they all sacrifice for the badge. That's the whole game. And you saw, PSG sort of try to be Real Madrid for a long time, and it didn't work because, honestly, the players on the field were more important than the badge. At least they thought they were. So when that happens, it actually does sort of backfire on you. And you saw PSG sort of run away from the Galacticos era in the last couple of years. And you've seen a lot of teams in world football running away from that idea of just gathering talent and throwing them out there and just saying, make it work, right? Like, you don't have super teams anymore. This is like in the NBA where you had a whole generation of super teams. You had the Celtics, the Heat, the Golden State Warriors, the Houston Rockets,
The Washington Wizards. No,
yeah,
I'm just kidding.
The Gilbert Arenas Washington Wizards, yep, or the Bradley Beal John Wall Washington Wizards. But no, you had super teams, and the super teams won titles. And in the last 5 years of the NBA, you've seen that the idea of the super team has sort of gone away a little bit. And it's more about having like one or two really top level guys and a bunch of role guys. And that's what started to win now. And in soccer, I think you're seeing something similar. I think you're seeing that era of Galacticos sort of going away, and you're seeing teams sort of build actual teams. Like Barcelona is not a Galacticos team. A lot of those guys are from that academy, and they've done a really good job of rebuilding that academy and bringing in, because Barcelona tried it. They tried bringing in Dembele and Coutinho and all the other friggin' guys they tried to bring in for ridiculous money, and it didn't work for them. Now they've sort of gone back to what made them successful in the early 2000s, and it's working for them now. They have a real team. Arsenal is a similar thing. There's no like mega super team being built at Arsenal. They're just a good, solid team. They work well together, and
They bought them. They've spent a lot of money. I would say. I don't know how many came from the Arsenal
spending
academy.
the money, because everything is expensive in football now. PSG paid $40 million for Vitinha. Honestly, they overpaid for Vitinha for where he actually was in his career at that point. I think Campos saw something, and the scouting was really good, and the overpay became an underpay. But they definitely overpaid for Vitinha. They definitely, I think, overpaid for João Neves based on just sort of where he was in his career, but it worked. And they overpaid for, they've overpaid for a lot of guys that, technically they probably, should have spent 10 to 15 million euros less on. But that's not the point. The point being that they're buying guys who are players who fit their system, that are really good, but they're not like big time superstars. They're not Vinicius. They're not Mbappé. They're not that level of big superstar. And Real Madrid are still living in the Galacticos era where you bring all of these guys together and it's like, all right, we now have 3 left wingers on our front line. Go out and figure out how to make it work, right? And just by Mbappe's sheer skill and talent, he's been able to score a crap ton of goals. But in reality, this Real Madrid team does not make sense. They don't make sense in the way they're constructed. And part of that is because Kylian Mbappe can't play the actual position he should be playing. And he's had to become a central striker, and he's not that.
Yeah, because there's a guy that plays his position who's actually better than he is, believe it or not. And so they got to get creative, and that's not working out, as we're seeing, as I kind of in the intro to this topic. Yeah, I wonder, do you think the pressure, they won everything last season, and then Mbappe comes in, best player in the world, and they're staring at not winning the La Liga title, and they're staring at not reaching at least the semifinal of the Champions League. That is a catastrophic failure for what they've put together.
What I tweeted today was I retweeted a video of him making that just god awful challenge. I mean, it just looks so bad.
Ugh.
Um,
Yeah.
so here's what I tweeted: playing at PSG covered up. It's such riveting radio to read stuff that I tweeted, but it'll make sense. Playing at PSG covered up a lot of this behavior because when he felt like he had a responsibility to his teammates and his country, he didn't do this kind of stuff. This is Mbappe without all of that. So I got what did I get? I got an angry tweet from somebody saying, "Bro, what kind of TikTok psychology is this? The guy just lost his head because the CBs had been trying to kill him and the ref was ignoring it."
I mean, that happened in Ligue 1 all the time.
Like,
he should be used to it by now.
no, but like my point being, look at what he got sent off 3 times at PSG. Twice in 2018 and once in 2019. That was when he was 19 and 20, I think, respectfully, right? So he was still really young. He wasn't the leader of that team yet. He was a burgeoning star who was still, he still wasn't as big as Neymar at that point. He still wasn't as big as, honestly, in the PSG ecosystem, he still wasn't even Cavani at that point yet. So he wasn't even Verratti at that point. So when he started to become the main guy at PSG, he began to, I think, act more responsibly on the field, right? Like, you didn't see that stuff. He hadn't gotten a red card since the Coupe de France final in 2019. Which was for a similar offense, by the way, where he kicked out at the guy in the corner and chopped at his leg. Like, I think part of it is the pressure of I mean, how honestly, like, and knock on wood on all this, because I'm not trying to pile on, but I guess I am a little bit. Like, how utterly embarrassing is it to the whole philosophy of Kylian Mbappe the last 2 years is that PSG were holding him back. He couldn't win a Champions League because he was on an inferior team. And if only he could go to a team with more history, with more pedigree, with more talent, Kylian would dominate world football and he'd win the Champions League and he'd complete football and he'd be the best footballer in the world. That was the theory of the case as it was presented. And if that goes up in smoke and PSG actually go farther without Kylian Mbappe, and Kylian Mbappe fails to make it to the semifinals, loses the league, loses a chance at his first Champions League, and possibly loses the Copa del Rey as well, that's essentially a trophyless season in his first year at Real Madrid. And at that point, the pressure really gets high at that point. And
I mean, look, if PSG wins the Champions League and Dembele wins the Ballon d'Or, Mbappe has to retire. I'm sorry. I mean, I don't make the rules. Like, you leave a team and they immediately win the Champions League and Dembele wins the Ballon d'Or, something he's also chasing. Done. Just, you won a World Cup, you're done. You got to stop. Like, there's no coming back from that.
No, but think about it. Like, honestly, in terms of impact, he's behind Dembele and he's behind Rafinha. Honestly, he's maybe even behind Lamine Yamal. Like, this is where we are.
Mo Salah.
Like, this is where we are. So I don't actually, like, I get completely why he's a little bit mad. I get why he'd want to lash out. I get his frustration. But I just think that this is one of those sort of glowing examples of why sports are weird. And what you think is going to happen isn't always what happens. It's why I'm saying, let's not get ahead of ourselves that PSG are just going to walk through Aston Villa on Tuesday. And let's not ever doubt that Florentino Perez, who's already leaked a story to the media about how they're going to try to sign William Saliba in 3 years.
Yeah.
Think about that. Like that only comes out if the owner tells people that that's going to come out, right? Like they're already trying
Yeah,
to.
I think the Athletic had it. The Athletic, so they've got a contact there that they for sure
But
leaked this
seriously,
to.
they're
Yeah,
actually have the balls to put that story out that they're going to tamper with a player who has 2 more years left on his contract. Like, what are we doing here, guys? Like, how are you being used like that? Like, can somebody in the media grow a pair of balls and just like stand up to this crap and say, no, I'm not going to
yeah.
do this. I'm not going to bend over for Florentino Perez and do his propaganda work for him. Like, seriously, what are we doing? So I wouldn't put it past Real Madrid to find a way to get through this and advance. I wouldn't put it past them. We've seen a lot worse with Spanish clubs.
Hey, it's what I said. The script writers are already figuring out a way how to turn this around. How do you turn around a 3-0
They are going
deficit?
to flop so hard in that game. You know that they're just anytime they're in the box, they're going to fall, and they're going to make that poor official have to swallow his whistle. Right? That's what they're going to do. And Arsenal have to be ready for it. I mean, God bless Arsenal for what they're going to have to put up with in that game. It's going
It's
to
gonna
be
be brutal.
brutal. Like Mbappe is going to be flopping, Vinicius is going to be flopping. Like I saw Fede Valverde against Alaves flopping already. They're practicing 3 days before the game. They're already practicing. They're flopping. Like they're going to do every dark art trick in the book.
It's gonna be like the Mighty Ducks. Take the hit, act hurt. Remember, just fall down.
It's going to be bad. It's going to be a hard game, a really hard game to watch. And I hope Arsenal know what they're in for. So yeah, but like I really do want to see. I really do think it would be a testament to sort of what PSG have become to go farther than Real Madrid this year. I do hope it happens.
I just after Wednesday, I want to see like the split screen of PSG celebrating the night before, and then Real Madrid going out, sad Mbappe with on the split screen with Luis Enrique being lifted up by his players, or just some kind of group celebration. I want to see that side by side. That's what I want to see this week. That would make my week if we could get that to happen. So, but as we know, football is crazy. We never know. We could totally eat our words, and who knows what's going to happen. This is going to be an insane week. So let's keep watching. Mark, thank you so much. I think we're right up on time here. I really appreciate it. Any final thoughts before we let you get out of here?
No, it's just I want to see a mature PSG go into a tough environment, execute their game plan, play 90 minutes of good solid football, and make their way to the semifinal. That's what I want to see.
Yeah, cool, calm, collected, professional football. Let's get out of there at Villa Park. We know Jonathan Johnson will be watching. He'll be rooting for his home team, Villa, but I think hopefully they come up a little bit too short and PSG advance. I just want a professional game. Let's just get out of there 1-1. I'll take it, and we'll see if it's either Arsenal or Real Madrid. I'll do my best to watch that game because I think you're right. It's going to be brutal. A lot of flopping going on.
Yeah.
So anyway, Mark, thanks so much for coming on. Remember, you can follow Mark on X at Marc Damon 9. Do that so then you don't have to listen to or read his tweets on here. So give him a follow. And thank you all out there for listening and subscribing as well. We really appreciate your support. We'll have a lot more on all things PSG. But until next time.
Au revoir for now.